Good evening. Welcome to the River Falls Municipal Utility Advisory Board meeting for September 18th. We have the roll call, Rhonda.
Swanson.
Here.
Richter.
Here.
Odine.
Here.
Mashesky.
Here.
Peterson.
Here.
Toon.
Here.
Looking for approval of the minutes from the meeting from August 21st.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Approval. Moving on to the public comments section. Is there anybody in the audience that has a comment? To address the board, anybody? Okay, thank you. Item number 1 is the consent agenda, which is the acknowledgement of the following minutes. It would be the West Central Wisconsin Biosolids Facility Commission of July 25th and the Powerful Choices Committee meeting of July 13th.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Approved. New business, item number 2 is the Utility Independent Auditors Report.
Adam, tonight we have Kimberly Schultz here, a CPA from Baker Tilly, and she's going to go over the utility portion of our audit. I know Baker Tilly now does a complete city audit together, but we're going to extract the utility portion of the audit, and she's going to give us a rundown of that tonight. So Kimberly, thanks for coming. The floor is yours.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to your meeting tonight. So I believe in your meeting materials, you should have a handout that says Report to the Utilities Advisory Board, which has Baker Tilly on the front. The financial statements that I believe you also have in your board packet, as mentioned, is the citywide financial statement. So it's over 120 pages. The utility information is dispersed throughout the financial statements. So I thought having a separate handout, really trying to highlight just the utility information would be useful. Also, I think flipping through 120 pages of trying to look at information is always difficult. But if you are interested in looking into more details, all the information that I'm presenting in the handout for 2016 is included in this financial statements. And starting on page 108 of the financial statements, we do have several schedules, a schedule for each utility revenues and expenses on a 2-year basis, so you can get some more details than what I'm going to cover. So just to start out, I'd say that we issued the city's financial statements in June. We issued what we call an unmodified audit opinion, saying that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. You'll also hear that referred to as a clean audit opinion, usually. Okay, so we'll take a look at the handout. And again, if you have questions as we go through here, please ask. So how this handout is set up, I have a few pages for each of the 3 utilities, and they're not all exactly the same between the utilities. I picked out which ones I thought were most relevant for each utility. So starting out on page 1 of the handout is looking at the electric kilowatt hours sold and comparing that on a 5-year trend. Looking at 2016, there was a slight decrease, about 1.7% of your total kWh sold. As we see the move towards conservation, rising utility prices, this is a trend that we are seeing throughout all of our clients. And I think one thing to look at, if you compare 2012 to 2016, the number of residential customers has increased 5.6% during that time, but your usage has only increased 2.8%. So I think you are seeing some conservation there, and as your population is growing, you're not getting the same rate of increase in the usage of your utility. Moving on to page 2 of the handout. So the regulated utilities are allowed a rate of return by the Public Service Commission. And this is a way that the PSC allows you to essentially be able to have funds in reserve for future growth, to pay your debt service and things of that nature. So the Public Service Commission on your current rates authorizes you a 6.5% rate of return on your rate base, which is essentially your net investment in plant plus and minus a few different things. So you're allowed 6.5% rate of return. For 2016, you had 3.47, so you are a little bit under your authorized rate of return. Historically, over the previous 4 years, you well exceeded your rate of return. And one thing, this page, the rate of return, I think, is a little bit, actually, it's quite a bit skewed by the transactions that you had terminating your generating contracts. So 2012 through 15 had significant additional gains related to terminating that contract, and then 16 had no revenue related to that, but still had one last year of expense related to the loss on disposing of your plant. So I would say all of these years are skewed in different ways because of that transaction and the way that the Public Service Commission required the accounting for that. I would say 2017, I would expect you would have no revenue and no expenses from that transaction, so you'll get a better sense of what's going on. For 2016, just to give you a sense, the last year of amortization was $277,000. So it is pretty substantial when you look at your operating income. Okay. Looking at page 3, one number we always look at is your unrestricted cash on hand. And the way we like to look at that is to look at that as a number of your estimated monthly revenue to get a sense of the adequacy of the cash that the utility has on hand to use to pay your current obligations. So at the end of 2016, your monthly income was about $1.1 million, and you had unrestricted funds on hand of just over $7 million. So that is over 6 months of cash on hand. We generally would recommend 3 months kind of as a minimum to have enough on hand just to meet your basic cash flow needs and your repairs and maintenance or things that might come up throughout the year. So having over 6 months is ample reserves, and you can see that trend has been increasing over the last 5 years as well. The electric utility has no debt, so that's another positive. I think the other utilities, I will be talking about debt coverage ratios and things like that, but those are not applicable to the electric utility. Moving on to page 4, this is the first page related to the water utility. Similar analysis here. On page 4, we have the water gallons sold for the last 5 years. This one is, if we look at it over the last 5 years, it isn't completely comparable because the Public Service Commission has changed some of the categories over the years. You see the multifamily residential showed up in 2014. That previously was in commercial. Same thing with irrigation. That was a new category that was created in 2013. But looking at the totals, your totals really have been slightly declining over this period of time. Between 2015 and 2016, actually there was a 1.5% increase from 15 to 16. Your residential, which is the most significant piece though, has a slight decrease. And you can see that trend over the last 4 years, certainly, in the decline in your residential customers. I believe 2012 was an anomaly. I think that was a weather-related. I think that is a very high usage, which was very unusual.
I was just going to say, because of the irrigation, the weather-related variations are really what stick out in these types of reports. So a wet year, water consumption down, a dry year, water consumption up. There's no doubt about it.
Moving on to page 5. Page 5 is looking at the rate of return for the water utility. The Public Service Commission, with your 2016 rates, approved a 5.25% rate of return. For 2016, you had an actual return of just over 4%. Given that your rates were effective in June, you only had half a year of your increased rate, so I would expect you to fall a little bit short of that rate of return for the year that your rates have only been in effect for half of the year. I think one thing to note, your operating income was up nicely in 2016, which you would expect with a rate increase, but I think your operating income, improved, both showing you did increase your consumption just slightly, your increase of rates, and that outpaced your increase in expenses. I'm looking at page 6. Page 6 is a chart showing your water utility debt coverage calculation. So the water utility has 2011 revenue bonds that require you to have net earnings 125% of your annual debt service, of your principal and interest payment. So the chart on the top, the blue is your actual net revenue calculation, which is essentially your revenues minus your operating expenses, and the red is the required amount in your bond covenant. So you can see you've been comfortably over that requirement here every year of the last 4. For 2005, okay, I see 2016 must not have printed. Is that on your copy?
No.
Okay.
The chart, but not.
Okay.
no.
Yeah, it's on the table, but not on the. But as you can see, in 2016, you are comfortably ahead of the 1.25. I apologize for the error, and I lost a column when I printed this. On page 7. Page 7 is looking at the water utility and the unrestricted cash that you have on hand. You have actual unrestricted cash of over $1.4 million. Compare that to monthly revenues of $138,000. You have over 10 months worth of operating cash on hand, which again, a target would generally be about 3 months. So you have very ample cash flow and cash balance in the water utility. Page 8. One thing we like to look at with utilities is what percent of your plant is funded by debt versus funded through your earnings and through your equity. And we like to see that be no more than 50% of your plant financed through debt. So in this case, the water utility has a relative, I would say, low debt balance. So you have 89% of your net plant is funded by equity. And you can see that number has trended, just increased year over year, which is a really positive trend. On page 9, we start the review of the sewer utility. I'm here looking at your volume billed, 310 million. That is up just slightly. Again, similar with the water, we are seeing the residential category, which is your largest category, just slowly decrease over the past several years. But overall, between 15 and 16, you did have a slight increase. On page 10, since the sewer utility does not have a rate of return, that is something that is only calculated for regulated utilities. I've put an analysis of revenues compared to expenses on page 10. In 2016, you had total revenues of $3.2 million compared to operating expenses of about $2.2 million for a net operating income of $950,000. So out of that, you have routine plant acquisitions and debt service payments. Just to comment, your last sewer rate increase was in March of 2012, but I think as we go through the slides here for the sewer utility, you'll see that the financial position has held pretty strong. So on page 11, the sewer utility has 2 revenue bonds, a 2015 revenue bond and then 2016 revenue bonds, and they have a 125% requirement similar to your water revenue bond. So for 2016, compared to your 125%, you actually had 561%. That is skewed a bit because your debt service, just based on how the repayment schedules came this year, was down, but you have far exceeded that 125 mark all of these years. So you continue to be strong with that debt coverage. On page 12 is a look at the sewer utilities, unrestricted cash on hand. Again, this one is very, very strong. You have over $2.5 million in unrestricted cash at the end of 2016. That is over 9.5 months of operating revenues. So that number has continued to increase year over year. Again, very strong if we're looking at kind of a target of about 3 months. And the last page, this is again looking at the sewer utility, looking at what percent of your plant is financed by equity versus debt. So you have 63% of your equity at the end of 2016 was financed by equity. So that's well in excess of kind of the 50-50 split, that I think is a basic target. So I think that's a pretty strong indicator. In 2016, with the additional investment in your plant and the additional debt, this ratio still looks strong. Okay, any questions?
I've got a question I believe for Kevin. Is this, there were several points where you said we're in a strong position, and that sounds good. And I'm just wondering, kind of philosophically, does the utility aim to be ahead of capital improvements such that we're able to be ahead of the game and have these funds be in that strong position? Is it something we are getting lucky on? Is it something we're doing on purpose? How are we getting to that point, I guess is my question.
I think, I was thinking about that as Kimberly was talking. I think it kind of does reflect maybe my financial attitude a little bit. I'm a little more conservative. I do think about things that are coming up in sewer and water, and I know that there is going to be investments that need to be made in the future, so I'm always thinking about making sure we're being responsible with the money and having a little more available rather than a little bit less. Because like I said, I know there are some fairly significant expenditures on the horizon if we want to keep up and replace our systems as necessary. So that's just kind of my internal philosophy, and I guess it shows up in these reports. So I'm not doing it to hoard money or try to get a large balance. I'm doing it because I see things on the horizon that are going to need to be done.
Thank you.
Kimberly, that was awesome. Thank
Thank
you
you for
so
coming
much.
out.
I really, really
Thank you.
appreciate you
Thanks.
taking the time to come out tonight. Thanks.
Item number 3 is the W Ppi Energy Presentation.
Yeah, we're fortunate tonight to have Mike Peters, President and CEO of W Ppi Energy, here this evening to give us a report on W Ppi. And as he's taking the stage, our customer service rep, Weston Arndt, who's here 2.5 days a week, has a little something from W Ppi Energy for you. I think it's a light bulb, so a light bulb and a night light. So anyway, Wes does a great job for us. Again, he's here 2.5 days a week. He works with our large customers. He's here to answer all kinds of billing questions and makes a lot of phone calls and a lot of visits to our large customers. So Wes, thanks. You do a great job. Yeah, Mike Peters.
Yes, and members of the commission, I appreciate the opportunity to answer your questions, give you a little background on WPPI and some of the projects that we are undertaking on your behalf, and obviously respond to any questions, comments, or concerns that you have. You have a copy of the presentation in front of you. A couple things I'll cover: our business plan and the process that we went through to develop that plan, some of the priorities that we identified in that process, and where we're at starting out in meeting those priorities. And then an update on some power supply projects that we have recently announced. WPPI has a history of planning. We, for a number of years, going back 20, 25 years, have done a series of 3 to 5 year plans. This last business plan that we undertook was a 5-year business plan. We spent the better part of 2016 meeting with members. In fact, we had 11 community meetings where we brought members of all of our representatives of all of our members together at different locations and listened to them. Before we drafted the plan, we wanted to hear from the members what the challenges that they were facing back home what role they saw WPPI providing assistance in response to those challenges, and is there a joint action approach to addressing some of the concerns locally that you have with respect to your utility and where it's going into the future. And so we use that input from the member meetings. We did customer surveys. Our customers are our member community, so we did detailed surveys of our members to hear directly from them about, again, what challenges they're facing, how they view WPPI, and maybe some of the areas where we could focus our resources on. We discussed this throughout the year. We had several board meetings where we made presentations, again, got feedback from that. As a result of that process, one of the areas that we really saw that WPPI needed to step up in was in the area of technology. A couple things driving that: evolving customer expectations. You know, we all know that customers expect to be able to pull out their phones, see information, get real-time information, whether it's how much electricity did I use yesterday, can I pay my bill online, can I pay my bill using my smartphone, can I get text messages from my utility, email messages from my utility, can I put information into the utility by text or by email. Those are all things that customers expect to be able to do. If they want to deal with their utility at 2 o'clock in the morning, they expect to be able to do that. Right now, we're not there, but we definitely know that that is something that we need to focus on, and we are in our business plan going forward. The technology has evolved. I know that you're moving forward with AMI technology. The metering technology today is so much more advanced than just the last 5 to 10 years. The software, the meter data management packages that are available now, that we can take that data that you're able to get from the meter reads, and we can make it usable for you and usable ultimately for your customers so that they can see it in a presentable format. WPPI has invested in that technology and have integrated into the billing systems and into the metering technology so that when we go to the next step, we'll be prepared to do that. And then finally, we know that one area where we needed to focus and work with our members on was rates and competitive rates, and we have done that. We have put in place marketing rates, new load market pricing plan where we can reduce for a period of time the power costs for a new customer of a certain size or customers that are expanding. Last week at our annual meeting, we heard from a customer that located in the city of New London. It was already there, but they were looking at expanding their plant. They had 3 other locations they could have put that plant. And the manager said, without a doubt, the new load market pricing tariff that we provided resulted in that expansion showing up in New London and not going to Georgia or to one of their other Wisconsin locations. So we know it's effective. We know it can work. We also have another customer that's signed up and is on the rate in Kaukauna. So our members have moved forward with putting that rate in place. It's another tool that you have in your toolbox when you're talking to customers to locate in your industrial park. And also talking to customers that are here and looking to expand. You can work with them. So that's something we definitely have done. On the technology side, we have, so you take the meters that we now have with the AMI technology, you take the meter data management system, that's the software package. It's about a $2 million investment that WPPI made a few years back, and we have the staff trained and working with that software. Integrated with our customer information system, Northstar, and from that, we are looking at a couple of things. One is a customer engagement platform. We're actually demoing or piloting a customer engagement platform. That's a portal, a web portal, so that customers can interface with the utility, get real-time data, pay their bills, get information from the utility, both two-way. They can put information in, get information out. That is being piloted in 2 of our communities, Sturgeon Bay and Waupun. Our plan is, as we're continuing to work out the integration issues, be able to offer that to members later this year, and then do a pretty full rollout next year so that our members can begin implementing that by early next year. So we're well along the way in making that available to our members. The other area where technology is gone ahead of where WPPI and our members at is in outage management systems. We put together a task force to look at what's available from an outage management system. Let me tell you, give you an example of what a state-of-the-art outage management system can do. So let's say you have a storm outage, you have in place a state-of-the-art system, a meter goes out. The meter sends a signal to your customer information system. Your CIS system immediately starts pinging all the meters in and around that meter to define the geographic area of the outage. And with that system, it tries to identify the cause of the outage. Is it a breaker? Is it something in the substation, et cetera? It immediately sends a message to your customers, and if they've said they want to get text messages, it'll send a text message. If they want to get an email, it'll get an email saying, we know your power's out, and we're dispatching crews to determine what the problem is, and we'll keep you updated. A note goes in every one of the customer's files that is effective, that power was out. If it knows why it was out, it'll put that in the system. It will send a work order to the lineman, and linemen can pull it up on their laptop or their iPad. They know where the outage is at. They know the information. They can roll the truck, go out and take a look at the outage, restore service. When they restore service, the system automatically recognizes that the meter's back online. It starts pinging all the other meters to verify everything is back online. It sends an email or a text message to your customer saying your service has been restored. If this is not the case, please let us know. And if nothing happens, obviously power is back on. A note goes into the customer's file that service was restored and what caused the outage, how long the outage lasted. All of this is done without somebody in the office answering the phone necessarily and taking a call from customers. Customers we know don't necessarily want to call the utility and tell us their power's out. They expect us to know that. And with these types of systems, we will know that, you'll know that, you can get ahead of some of the outage. We've heard of systems we know of utilities that use this system, and they actually are a lot of times ahead of customers even knowing the service is out. Something happens during the day, they're at work. You can have a crew go out during regular working hour, get service restored versus customer comes home from work at 6 o'clock at night after work, the power's out, calls the utility, now you're sending out a truck after hours, you've got additional expenses that you're incurring. So it really is a nice way to manage a utility system, and it is really where the utility industry is heading. So we put together a task force to look at these systems and what it would take to work collectively through WPPI to reduce the cost and have the expertise available. So that's something that we're working on right now with the task force, and we expect to have that group report out. We did report out at the annual meeting last week, and we'll keep the membership updated as that task force continues to work. Let's talk about power supply. Our objective in the area of power supply is reliable, cost-effective, environmentally responsible power supply for our members for the long term. We have some open space. In other words, we have some needs that we need to meet starting in 2019, and we're looking at available resources. And right now, based on the information that we have, we know that renewables, demand response, energy efficiency, and in some cases natural gas are really the low-cost options for us. Last year we did an RFP, a request for proposals for renewable energy. We anticipated that we'd get a number of responses. We didn't know exactly how many, but we expected that wind would be our low-cost option. So we released the RFP. We got 60 proposals from over 30 developers in about an 8-state region around our Wisconsin, Michigan, and Iowa service areas. So we were pretty taken aback by the level of interest in providing renewable energy to our member systems through WPPI. We were able to go through those proposals, narrow it down to a list of 10, and then pursued those developers and spent time working with them on their proposals. Ultimately, it resulted in us signing a long-term purchase power agreement for solar. And the Point Beach Solar Project will come online in 2021. It'll be the largest solar array in the state of Wisconsin, if not the upper Midwest. And it actually reduces our long-term power cost from what other options were available to us. So from our standpoint, it's a win-win-win. It meets a resource need that we have, it's renewable energy, and it's very cost-effective compared to all other options that we had. Once we had that one locked up, we went back to the information that we had, and we had 3 other projects that looked promising, and we met with those developers. And again, with the thought of adding, filling in some space that we had, we pursued a particular wind project that looked very promising to us and negotiated with the developer and signed a purchase power agreement just a few months ago, and they've already started construction. That's a 132 megawatt wind project that's going to be in northern Illinois, but it's connected through the transmission system to the WPPI area. We can get it into our service area. And again, that was a project that filled the need, was renewable, and reduced our power supply costs long term. So again, a cost-effective project for us over the long term. We're still looking at the data. We're still looking at the information that we got through that RFP process and continue to talk to developers. When we find a project that makes sense for us, and what we look at is, does this reduce our cost? That's one of the driving factors. And in this case, the added benefit of the renewables is just a perfect fit for us. By the year 2022, when the Point Beach Solar comes online, between the Point Beach Solar, the Bishop Hill Wind Project, and our other wind projects that we have under contract, and some of the other smaller renewable projects, will be well over 22% renewable. And when you combine that with the nuclear that we get from Point Beach, we'll be over 40% emissions free in our overall portfolio. And most likely that 22% is going to continue to climb as renewables continue to be a very cost-effective resource for us. Last priority for us is to maintain our strong financial position. Last year and I thank River Falls for being one of our early members in extending your all requirements contract with WPPI. We spent a lot of time meeting with the membership, discussing the need to extend the contract that we had that ended in the year 2037, which at the time seemed like a long period of time before we had to deal with it. But those 2 contracts that we just signed, the Point Beach Solar and the Bishop Hill Wind Farm, go well beyond the 2037 termination date that we originally had in those contracts. So, but for those extensions that we were able to do last year, those were 2 contracts that we would not have been able to negotiate and enter into. So it worked out exactly as we had explained to members. We didn't have any particular projects in mind, but we knew opportunities would present themselves, and that's why we asked our members to extend those contracts, and it's exactly how it worked out. We were fortunate to have a couple of very cost-effective renewable projects that we were able to enter into on behalf of the members because of us extending those contracts. We were also able to do a refinancing last year. We were able to save almost $10 million on a net present value basis of expense for our members. Again, it's a cost reduction over the long term. When you look at our wholesale rates, our rates in 2016 were actually 2.2% lower than they were in 2015, and actually have held pretty constant for the last 5 years. Our rates in 2012 were relatively equal to what they were in 2016, and our rates this year, again, have held relatively flat. We did put in place a rate design change for 2017. We have our highest cost time of the year from a power supply standpoint is the summer months. We have to have resources that are basically sitting on standby so that when the air conditioning ramps up in the warmer months, we're able to call on that generation and meet that demand. And so we have a significant part of our expense that is completely tied to just those summer months. And so we designed our rates at December board meeting last year. We proposed a new rate design that has a higher demand charge in the summer months. It's a 2-step rate. It's flat at the beginning part of the year. It steps up in May and June, and then it reaches the highest points in July and August, and then steps back down in August and September, and then back down to that lower cost rate. We've implemented it for 2017. We don't anticipate any design changes for 2018. And we're hearing feedback from the members that, they have gotten questions, no doubt, because, you just saw those higher monthly bills in August for July usage. And so we have gotten questions, but the commercial and industrial customers haven't gotten a lot of pushback, if any at all, at that level. Some of the residential customers have asked about, the bill and what the PCA charges, why that was higher. And you all have been very effective in explaining the difference in the rate design and why it's higher. And so we're going to let that rate continue and see what kind of feedback we get from the members by the end of the year. And then finally, member engagement. We greatly appreciate River Falls and your level of engagement with WPPI. Kevin sits on our executive committee. I know the commitment that he makes to the organization. It's important to you. It's important to your customers that you have a say in your power supply. And we appreciate the level of involvement that River Falls provides and the leadership that you provide through Kevin's participation in the executive committee. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments or concerns that you might have about WPPI, where we're at and where the future is.
Mike, I don't know if it's appropriate to, I don't know how much you can talk to our 8th largest customer who may have an impact on wholesale rates moving forward. We're just not sure about yet. I don't know if you want to go there or not.
I'll be happy to talk about it. We
Briefly.
You know, you're part of an integrated system through WPPI, so impacts in other parts of the system on another member can potentially impact your wholesale rate. And we have a situation right now where a very large retail customer of one of our member utilities, Kaukauna Utilities, is in a receivership, which is basically a state version of bankruptcy. That customer alone, if it were a member of WPPI, would be our 8th largest customer. It's a very large paper mill. We'll know a lot more information by the end of this week, if not next, about whether the future of that paper mill. It's been a 100-year-old customer. Obviously, the paper industry is a very competitive and difficult industry. They have some niche products, but whether or not it's enough to see them through this receivership is yet to be determined. Right now, there is scheduled to be an auction. We know that there are some potential buyers that would continue to operate the business in a restructured environment, and we hope that is ultimately the outcome. In the off chance that the facility goes dark and is no longer a customer, it will have some impact on WPPI's wholesale rate. We've met at the executive committee and have talked about this customer for a number of years. And we met in closed session at our board meeting last week, and we'll wait to see what the impact is. It is manageable. It's not a number that would, cause great concern amongst our member utilities. It's actually less than some of the rate increases that we've had to implement over the last 6 or 7 years on a standalone basis. So, but it could potentially have some impact. If the customer does go dark, we'll provide more information directly to the members about the impact. And then we are looking at ways to possibly mitigate that. We may be able to reduce that cost by doing some things with our own finances. So we'll take a look at it. We'll know more by the end of next week what the future holds for that. But just want to assure you that whatever the ultimate impact is, it is something that is definitely manageable. I would venture to say your residential customers wouldn't notice the impact. It's not that large of an impact. Your commercial industrial customers that may watch their utilities bills more closely, they might see a 1 or 2% impact. They can notice those size of an impact. A residential customer wouldn't necessarily see that. So, but we have talked to our board and our executive committee, and we're keeping them abreast of what's going on.
Thanks. I thought that was important to get ahead of that in case that news comes out. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think we sent information to our executive committee all along the way, and we'll see what happens at the end of this receivership process. We hope a buyer steps in, continues to operate the company, and we don't see much, if any, impact to WPPI and our members, so we'll see.
Any other questions or comments for Mike?
I just have a question.
Sure.
And I asked Kevin the last time when this was presented about, it's the renewable energy piece of your slide, where you're talking about the open space and building the Point Beach Solar Energy Center and the Bishop Hill wind plants. That's, I mean, you're building these things, or somebody's building these things, and it's going to be more cost-effective than what you could
Yes.
do. How is that? I just don't get it.
Well, give you a little history of where we've come with power supply. 3 years ago, WPPI was working with a consortium of utilities in Minnesota and Wisconsin, and we were looking at siting a state-of-the-art natural gas combined cycle power plant. Nobody's building coal, we know that. We've watched what's happening in the nuclear industry down south. There's not going to be, there's potential that one of those two plants under construction gets built, the other one seems to be dead. So nuclear is not an option for us. And so that leaves natural gas and renewables and demand-side management, energy efficiency as sort of a management tool, but not a power supply resource. So we were involved with this group of utilities, and we were looking at building a large combined cycle natural gas plant. We had two locations. One was in Superior, Wisconsin. The other was possibly in central to southern Wisconsin. So we met with the manufacturers for that technology, for natural gas turbines. We had the most recent information on the cost of turbines, the cost of plant construction. We had a consulting engineer that worked with our group that basically said, this is the kilowatt hour charge that you will pay for this power coming out of this plant based on these gas prices. We had gas supply experts come in, talk to our group. This is the price of natural gas. This is projections of where it's going to be for the next 5, 10, 20 years. So we had perfect information, as much as you can have before you decide to build a plant. We looked at that information, and we looked at the cost coming out of that plant, and we decided it may not be our best option. And so we also knew that the tax credits for renewables is starting to phase out. The first phase out started in 2017, so it's starting to phase out, and it's going to phase out by the year 2021, I believe. And so we thought maybe it's a good time to take a look at renewables. We'll see if developers are being aggressive to take advantage of the tax credits that are there. And sure enough, we did the RFP last year. And in every instance, when we did the analysis of the two projects that we purchased, we do a scenario planning where we look at, okay, if gas prices are $2, $3, $4, if capacity charges are zero, if you get zero capacity credit, all the way up to the cost of 50% of the cost of a new gas generator, peaking plant. So we look at all these different scenarios. And for the Bishop Hill wind farm, in every scenario, Bishop Hill was cheaper than any other option we could come up with. Gas at $2, which that was the lowest it's been ever. Right now, gas is at $3, give or take, and it seems to be $3 to $4 is the projected price going forward. So with gas at $2 and capacity at zero cost, the Bishop Hill wind farm was still cheaper for us on a kilowatt hour basis than that as an option. So that wins hands down over any other option that we could study. For the Point Beach Nuclear, the Point Beach Solar facility that's going to be built on the property at Point Beach Nuclear, the only time it did not show a lower cost compared to everything else was at gas, I believe, being at $2 and capacity being at zero. And these are instances that we don't see. I mean, you just don't see that. But in every other case, it reduced our revenue requirement. So the cost of the technology has dropped that much. The value and the tax credits are still there. And so you have developers that are able to make money on these projects with these low costs. So I'm like you. 5 years ago, these projects were not possible at these costs. Couldn't do these projects at these costs. Today you can. They are less expensive.
So the ownership of the actual plant,
yes,
is the ownership?
The developers.
The developer.
Yep, the developer
owns it?
owns the plant. We enter into a purchase power agreement with them. We have a 20-year and a 22-year purchase power agreement. 20 years for the solar and 22 for the wind projects. So we'll get all the output of those plants during the life of those contracts. We also, from a risk standpoint, if something happens and they go offline, we don't pay. We only pay when they produce. So that's another reason. Right now, because of the tax credits, we're tax exempt, just like your utility, we're tax exempt. And so over the years, the only way we can get tax advantaged pricing is to do a purchase power agreement. And so the developer is taking advantage of the tax credits, and we get lower pricing than what we could do if we did it ourselves. In the future, once these tax credits no longer are available, then our lower cost of capital will probably result in us being able to do projects cheaper than a developer could. So at that point, in the mid-20s to 2030, then we'll probably be doing projects that we own directly because of our capital structure. It may not be that way, but my guess is that's what will happen. But yes, these projects are very cost effective.
Is that, with, you mentioned the tax credits?
Yep.
I assume those are not there with natural gas?
Correct.
Okay.
They're renewable tax credits.
So does that swing? It's just that I'm surprised purely based on my understanding of the efficiencies of creating the power.
Yeah.
And I would think natural gas would win that contest alone.
Well,
So-
there are different types of power supply resources,
Yeah.
absolutely. The natural gas is dispatchable.
Right.
But the way the markets work today, it's not like it was where 20 years ago you had to rely on your power plant to produce your kilowatt hours in order to keep the lights on. That's not the way the industry is structured now.
Okay.
You have to have capacity that you can point to. That capacity may not actually run. It might be cheaper to get energy out of the market than it is out of your plant. So we do get some capacity credit for wind. It's not a great amount. It's about, I believe, 18%. And so if you have a 100 megawatt wind farm, you may only get 18 megawatts of capacity. We have to have about 1,200 megawatts of capacity under contract or owned, which we do. But we're getting energy out of that wind farm, which really is what we're looking at. The solar is another matter. The solar, we get actual capacity credit because it's on peak. You think about when solar is going to generate, it's during the day when we need the peak capacity, and especially during the summer. That's when we'll get the highest value for those solar resources. And in the markets in MISO, we get actual capacity after it's been operating. And so we anticipate that we could get as much as 65 to 70% capacity credit out of that solar system. So when you look at it from that standpoint, there's real value in the solar, not only from the energy produced, but also the capacity value. It's a really good fit for us. So it's just the way the markets are structured today. You don't have to rely on your own assets. Matter of fact, every day in our operations center, they make a decision. There are days when we get energy out of the market and we don't run our own resources because energy in the market might be cheaper than the fuel cost and the O&M cost of our own resource. And in that case, we'll take it from the market. We optimize, it's called optimizing your resources. So, yep.
And we were given a presentation on how daily they're up at 6 in the morning looking at available resources in the markets, and it is very, very sophisticated. It was really amazing to me how much time and effort and knowledge goes into choosing resources and buying and selling and projecting.
Yeah, in
It's
this
pretty
day and
amazing.
age, you've got more economists and CPAs involved in power supply than you do engineers in a lot of cases. So
I'd like to know where you get your weather information then.
well, we actually buy weather information.
Okay.
We subscribe to a couple of different services that provide that kind of intel to utility companies
Okay.
on a national basis.
I'm a painter and I don't trust weathermen. It's,
Well,
so.
you know, and we also have databases. We literally, our staff will go back. They will try to find in our own database days that have the same type of weather, the same load characteristics, and go back in our system and say, okay, 3 years ago on this particular date, the weather matched up perfectly with what we're predicting tomorrow. And so therefore, on that day, here's how much load we needed. And so we try to predict that based on those inputs. So there's art, there's science, there's math. But it's a daily effort on behalf of our staff. And yes, they're there every morning at 5:30, starting their day to go through that data in order to get ready for the day. So.
Yeah, when I saw that presentation, I was really taken aback. It's very sophisticated at
Absolutely.
a lot of different levels.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And as I said, there's as many economists and CPAs and that type as there are engineers involved in power supply.
I'm impressed that your own email address is on the back of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Kevin has told us how big WPPI is, but
Yeah.
just as a matter of, because you can, would you
Yep.
share with us just regionally where you're at, how many customers, however you want to phrase it is fine, but, being the position you're in, to see your email address, know that we could contact you is a great thing.
I respond to my own email, so if I get an email from you asking a question, happy to respond. I answer my own phone, the direct lines, I'll answer the phone, so I feel, I work for you. I work for Kevin. He's on my board and executive committee. He's my boss. I answer his phone calls and his emails, so, yeah. Appreciate that. You bet.
No, I've commented to Mike too, not only Mike, but his staff from the Sun Prairie area will drive up here to do a 3-hour training for our staff. So they're very accessible. They know they have 50 communities that they have to reach out to, and they treat River Falls the same as they do Kalkana, who is an hour away. So
Yep.
they make the effort, and we really, it doesn't go unnoticed, and we appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
You bet. Thank
Appreciate
you.
Items number 4, 5, and 6 are the finance report, utility dashboards, and the monthly utility report.
Al Rolex here, he's going to give us a little update on our financial report. So we got the macro level financial report, and I was talking to Al in the hall today and just said, this is the micro report, I guess, from the last
Well,
month or
it's
two.
more of a past report of past events as opposed to a report of current events. Yeah, boy, three items. I'm the winner tonight, I guess. But just want to give you an idea.
Just 30 minutes each, Al, all right?
I'll try to hold it to that. So, just a very brief overview of where we are today in terms of the utility funds in the city. And you've all received a copy of this in your packets, so it's not news to you. But the electric fund, year-to-date, we're just under $9 million in revenues. This is incidentally through August. So just under $9 million in revenues. That is a decrease of about $233 from the previous year. So there's some conservation going on out there on top of, I'm sure, a cooler than normal summer and all of those kinds of things that play into that. The purchase power is $27,000 cumulatively higher in comparison to 2016, so we have more purchased power. Programming purchases and powerful choices is $46,000 higher in comparison to last year. We're surmising is due to the e-cycling program that is being offered this year. Seems to be a very popular program. Cash investments reserves totals $5.8 million. I think Kim said 6.3 at the end of 2015, or 2016. So it's down slightly, but we expect that those resources are being used out in the field, and we're still in a very healthy shape. Turning to the water fund, our year-to-date revenues are just under $1.3 million on the year. This is an increase of about $78,000 over the previous year. Operating expenses have also increased by $37,000 over the previous year. The utility reports a net income of $95,000 through the month of August, so we're looking good. Previous year was $55,000, so we're up over the previous year. And again, cash and reserves are a total of $1.5 million. $192,000 of that is restricted for debt service. The sewer fund, year-to-date, the revenues are at $2.2 million. It's a slight decrease from the previous year. Operating expenses have decreased $135,000 from the previous year. This is about 49% of our budget. So if you take a look at our budget, we're through about 2/3 of the year. We have spent less than half of our budget. Operating and maintenance continues to have a savings in expenditures, as we've just talked about. The year-to-date net income, again, this is just through August, $621,000. So that fund is doing very well. It's very healthy. Cash and investments are at $7 million, and $1.1 million of this is restricted for debt service. The stormwater fund, I don't know, Kevin, does a utility, is obviously a utility. I know a lot of this work is done through operations.
Yep, through Reed and.
But, yeah,
But with the utility advisory board, I guess, wants to, has final say over that, so we like to do the brief presentation, even though my hand is not in that too much.
We'll try and keep your hands out of it. No. Stormwater fund, year-to-date, is running revenues of about $367,000. This is an increase of about $14,000 over the previous year. The operating expenses have increased $106,000 this year over the previous year. In part due to additional staff, stormwater double fees being charged, and additional depreciation coming online. The utilities recorded expenditures for sidewalk, curb, and gutter repairs in August of $33,000, and cash and investments stand at $280,000 at the end of August. First of all, are there any questions regarding those details on the finances so far this year? Okay. I just wanted to turn then to a couple of items in the dashboard, kind of make you aware of what's going on. First of all, we already said that sales in electric are down. We also have our revenues are down, but also our sales are down. So we're down about 1.5 million kilowatt hours from the previous year, which is significant. And most of that those reductions come in just about every area when we look at area lighting, commercial and industrial power sold, residential power sold. We've had reductions in each of those areas. There was an interesting question at the last board meeting regarding sales versus purchased power. And Kevin sent out an email on that. I thought it was very well put. We do have some loss when power travels from one place to another. There's going to be obviously some loss in that, but also a big thing was timing.
So when we're billed from WPPI and then when our billing cycle is, so when those two cycles don't exactly line up, the numbers aren't exactly lining up. So it has to do with more of the billing, our bill from WPPI. Correct. And then when we bill our customers, and there's usually a lag in that or something that does affect the chart.
Right. So I just thought we'd revisit that a little bit so that you had a better understanding. I thought it was interesting on your dashboards that when we look at electrical outages, compared with the last 2 years, this year we've had only 2 electrical outages, which affected only 25 customers. So it tells us we're doing something right here and maintaining our system well.
We did some load shifting. I think I shared that with the group in the past year. Last summer we had some real hot days, and one of our circuits was getting overloaded, so we did some load shifting this year and balanced some loads out, so that helped.
Yeah. Moving on to water, it's also interesting to note that our water sales in terms of dollars are up this year. However, our sales by the gallon are down. They're reduced. I think that's just a result of our rate increase. And so the water utility continues to do well. By far, our 2 largest areas of sales come in residential and then in irrigation. And this year, our irrigation, I think, is probably down because we've had a pretty wet year. And the last couple of years have been very wet. So just looking at the wastewater, our effluents and biosolids are down from the previous year quite substantially. So I think the new systems are doing well. The new biosolids facility and our new treatment plant are actually treating us well. When we look at one other interesting stat, I think, when we look at water supplied versus wastewater treated, and we see that wastewater treatment in terms of flows rise above the amount of water pumped generally. And that, I think, is pretty directly result of infiltration.
Infiltration, yes.
Yeah, so we've got some areas where, I don't know if we've started programs in that area yet, Kevin?
Yes, we do sewer lining, and then we continue to investigate areas we think where infiltration might be happening.
Right, right. So we are addressing those. With that, I will conclude my comments, and if there are any further questions, I'll be glad to entertain those.
Thanks, Al. That was very good.
Thank you.
Moving on, announcements.
I know I don't have anything that's in addition. So just our crews are extremely busy. If you go down Winter Street, you can see the power plant substation is under construction. I know they were digging for foundations and should be pouring concrete for our switchgear building here maybe this week yet. So things are happening. You could go check that out. It's a big project, probably close to the $4 million version. So we're well underway with that.
Anybody else? For a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second. We're adjourned.